Welcome to Deep Look, Multiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Multiworld senior editor Keith Rayner. College action is happening, and we're breaking it all down today. Santa Barbara Invite kickoff in the books, and we're looking ahead to Florida warm-up a little bit later on. Keith, should be a fun show, but we got a couple notes to get to before we get to those college tournaments.
Indeed. It was fun getting to watch college live streams though. So I've definitely got the college season hype flowing. I've got into my second week of practice as a coach at UConn. So definitely got the college hype flowing. But there is some other stuff going on right now, and I do think we should start with news that just basically broke less than an hour ago, which is that an Ultimate player has won the World Games Athlete of the Year award. And that player is Valeria Cardenas from Colombia. World Games Athlete of the Year from the flying disc discipline. Pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah, and I think they do this contest every year, but it obviously means a lot more to win it in a year when there was actually a World Games. And yeah, she got over 35,000 votes. Ended up beating second place by less than 1% of her vote total. So it was down
like
to the final
votes.
Minutes. So big get out the vote campaign, and pretty cool thing. I mean, we've seen Ultimate players kind of like be in the top 5 of this, because there's obviously a lot of enthusiasm about going and voting for Ultimate player in this competition, but Vale feels like a very deserving winner. The only thing she didn't do was win the gold, but she was easily one of the best players of the tournament.
I don't know if the person she was up against, it was a Muay Thai champion, is like, I don't know if how their team did, if there's a team competition. I don't know how it compares, but I'll tell you what, I bet that person cannot throw a forehand full field the way Valeria Cardenas does. She got 2 throws in our throw of the year bracket that just went up too. Like, I mean,
feels deserved.
She's just winning all the things.
Yeah, I mean, I think, is there a question right now that she's the best thrower in the world?
I don't think so.
I just don't even think. I don't think there's anybody who's like in the conversation right now.
You feel so vindicated.
Oh my gosh, 100%.
You were before the rest of the staff. I feel like you were on.
People were hating. I don't understand, but yeah, I'm pumped. I think that we've got. Keep in mind, still really young, years to come of high level play from Manu and Vale.
It's one of those things. It's like when you just get used to somebody being really good. We're so used to them being good that it feels like they're like, I don't know, in the latter portion of their prime or whatever, but it's just starting.
Here's the thing. Vale and Manu, of course, born July 28th of 99. So my question is, are they going to be eligible for U24s? What is the eligibility rule? I think they're eligible, Keith.
I'm pretty sure they are.
Because I think if you turn 24 in the year of the tournament, you're eligible.
I think that's true.
And this is the year that they will turn 24. In fact, at the time of the tournament, they will not yet have turned 24.
The scourge of the under 24 division.
So I just want you to keep it in mind that they are eligible for under 24s.
College
and that is coming up in July.
Are going to have to guard them.
It is actually insane. Like, clearly Colombia will be number 2 to the U.S., but like legitimately, will they be the favorites to win in the women's division?
Probably. Oh, it's tough. I mean, it feels like a little coin flippy. I think I'd still favor the U.S.
I don't know about the depth of the Colombian team. Of course, that's going to be the problem, is because the U.S., of course, will be extremely strong all the way down. But like, let's look at the U24 roster real quick. I'm sorry for this digression, but I think it's worth taking a quick look at. So the 2023 U24s came out. We know this. Like, who's matching up there? You got Dawn Colton.
Pretty good foil.
Very good.
one of them.
who is taking the other matchup? I mean, you figure Don is going to have to play like every single D point. Like, I legitimately don't know if there's another player who can really. I mean, Stacey Gaskill maybe.
I'm not sure that she's quite.
But I don't know if she really matches up quite right.
Maybe you put her on volley. You have Abby Hecko, Cleo Phillips. Those are strong defenders.
I think I'm still going to come out here and the U.S. is the favorite. But Colombia is going to be a big problem. It is tough to deal with those two. They were tough to deal with 4 years ago.
Also, man, this U24 team, this women's team is young. There's a lot of youth on this team.
But they're going to be so good, Keith.
They're going to be good, but I mean, there's just a lot of young players on this team.
I think it's just that the problem for Colombia could be, and I truly don't know, but it could be that they just simply don't have enough good players past those two down the roster. Wild. Also, Keith.
Yeah, you get to take the victory lap on Valeria, but that's not your only victory, Charlie. You got another victory recently on the Huck and A podcast. Our neighbors to the north. Charlie and I were guests on the Huck and A podcast. It was actually 2 episodes ago because they had a Santa Barbara preview episode, which was quite good. It was a helpful listen. But so 2 episodes ago, Charlie and I went over to take a Great Canadian quiz. So we were quizzed about both Canadian Ultimate and Canadian Trivia general knowledge. And Charlie narrowly beat me out the final question where I shamed myself and my family. Although Charlie and I have received multiple notes that various Canadians were impressed with our knowledge and how well we did on the quiz. On the whole, I'm still incredibly embarrassed of how I performed on the final question.
I mean, I don't think it's fair to say that it was incredibly embarrassing. I mean, it's got to be frustrating for you coming in with the lead and then losing it on that question. In the fashion, so Charlie and I were tasked with naming as many Canadian provinces and territories as possible. And while we did better than the host expected us to do on those questions, I blanked on 2 really obvious provinces. And so that is a tough pill to swallow. I think neither Keith nor I is like a true expert in things Canadian. And we got a lot of questions wrong.
We sure did.
But I do think I found it to be sort of an entertaining thing. I think if you even Americans will enjoy it.
Yes.
Is what I would say. Especially
if you like hearing Charlie and I equivocate.
I've looked up the roster rules, Keith, and I have bad news for you.
No!
I'm sorry. It's true, though.
Amend them.
A player participating in the U24 divisions must be 14 years or older and must not be 24 years old or older during the calendar year in which the tournament concludes. And so they turn 24 this year, so they will be ineligible. So that was a nice thought experiment, and it's too bad they won't be able to play one more time.
We fell into the trap, Charlie. We went deep. It literally says under 24.
Well, right. The thing is, they will be under 24 at the time of the tournament. Like they turn 24 after the tournament starts. I think they should change the rules to make them eligible. That's what I think they should do.
There should just be an asterisk that says if you're really good, if you're the World Games Athlete of the Year, you and your twin sister could play. Like, just amend the rules.
Tough. Could have just born 6 months later. That would have been good. Dang it. All right. Well, that was a fun 2 minutes while we thought that could be a thing. Okay, let's get going. We got kickoff. We got Santa Barbara invite. Let's start out west. Very good tournament this year. A lot of good teams and some very interesting results. Cal Poly SLO wins in the men's division, but I don't think they were the best team there, Keith. We'll get to that. They beat Cal in the final. Cal losing some key players, but still got a really good zone. Still got a really good depth of team. And I think, it helps when a team goes to nationals and gets that experience. So they come out, they make the final, and they fall to Cal Poly SLO pretty clearly, and not super close game. And over in the women's division, Carleton comes back against Stanford in the women's final in order to get the win. Really turned on the Jets late in that one. And so no surprise there with the teams that pretty much all of us, Keith, listeners, and me, all picking both of those teams to win the tournament. So But a lot of stories to get to. Let's start in the men's division. Before we talk slow, I want to talk BYU. We kind of thought BYU was going to be in a rebuild year, Keith. They lose some key players like Jordan Kerr, and yet I think they looked better at this tournament than they did this time last year. They were dominant. They beat Cal Poly by 6 on Friday night. To be fair, Cal Poly was missing some players due to COVID, but still, it was not a contest. And BYU going undefeated and pretty much dominating in every single one of their matchups. They are so athletic, and they do a great job of forcing teams into kind of uncomfortable spots where they want to try to huck out of it, and they just win the aerial battles over and over again. And we've seen that for years. It helps that they have players who are on average a little bit older than your typical college team. It's very noticeable, but this is still a clear top 10 program, and I don't think we should expect that to be going anywhere anytime soon.
I kind of like, I wouldn't say I expected this, but I do feel like they were doing a little bit of the rebuilding last year. They still had Jacob Miller and Jordan Kerr, but they had I feel like a pretty young team last season. Like after you get past that top line.
That's
true.
So
I think that there was some reason to expect that group to come in a bit more seasoned and with a bit more depth to them. So, I see names that I recognize from playing with, the Lone Peaks and the Utah Swarms over the past couple seasons. And Porter Euler is still a name that he's got a couple years left after this too. So, it looked like BYU. It looked like what you expect from BYU. They were disciplined. They were athletic. They work really hard. And they were pounding slow in the deep space on Friday Night Showcase game. So they really, really took it to them. And I'm very curious how we're going to talk about Florida warm up when we get to the back end of the show. And we'll see how BYU could do on travel on back-to-back weekends. Nothing that's strange to them, but if you're not ready to get run over, like you need to be prepared to stop the deep game because they'll just run right through you to start.
They sure will. And Zach Burnside, I want to shout him out. Number 4, so fast, just wheels. I mean, and he'll just take off and they'll put it up, and he'll often just catch goals 5 yards away from a defender. And the thing is, they have jumpy players like can win in the air, and then they also have a lot of speed. It's a problem. I don't know that they have the thing they don't have that they've had in the past, Keith, is like a really talented thrower, like a really rock solid center handler type. They don't really have that, but they do have a lot of throwing depth. I mean, that's something that's really, I think, is building up from the youth scene in Utah. Just like a lot of skill throwing inside breaks and stuff like that. So they have that continuation throwing ability. But I think if teams can force them to get out of a normal flow offense rhythm where cutters are hitting cutters, you could cause them problems because they'll take some weird shots. And I mean, they had some turnovers. It's not like they were like a super clean O-line. The thing is, they're so athletic, it's hard to punish them for the turns.
A great way to make up for if you have technical errors like that, it's just to be the bigger, faster, stronger, harder working team. get the turn back the other way. So very impressive stuff. I think it's hard to argue that BYU was the class of the men's division this tournament.
Of course, they did not play on Sunday, and that meant that Cal Poly Slow rolled through to a win. They did not lose again after losing to BYU, and they did have one. They had one or two close games. They beat UBC by 1 at the end of the day on Saturday, but cruised through bracket play. Ended up beating Cal 13-8 in the final, and an excellent UC Santa Cruz team 11-7 in the semi. We'll talk about them in a second. Of course, the big news for Cal Poly, Keith, is that Calvin Brown is back on the field. He's playing D-line. And, it was kind of the Calvin Brown experience out there. Like, he was throwing some dimes and he was throwing some turns. I mean, he had a lot of turnovers. And that's, that was the story before his injury, too. There's just no question that he has the just unbelievable ability to make throws that very few players, maybe no other players in the division can make. But he's going to have to dial it in. Now, obviously, this is his first time back on the field. I don't think we need to be worried about it, but I do think it's something to keep in mind that like if they really want to level up to the team that they can be, which is probably a semis contender at nationals, he's going to have to be sharper. And so, he's got 5 months to get sharp. But he's moving really well. I think that's the big news that I would say is that just watching him running around, I think he's moving laterally well. I think he's showing off good speed. He's getting up line. And that, I think, is the bigger thing. I think you'd be more worried if he was looking like he was not comfortable physically. The throws are going to get there.
Yeah, but when you started saying, well, there's absolutely no question that Calvin Brown has I thought that sentence was going to end with greenest light humanly possible. Just absolute full on, full go, full send. Whatever you see, go for it. I guess you rated it over time, or maybe you don't. Maybe you just say this is who Calvin is. This is why we put him on D-line. He's going to take a lot of shots. We're going to get a lot of breaks doing that. And I think it's a great sign that they have the faith in him to put him on D-line. That to me shows that there's a belief in his mobility. Because you can't put somebody on D-line like that if they're not going to be mobile. He's probably has a pretty big role on their D-line, but they showed off some of the depth and the skill that we've seen and from them over the past few seasons. So I do think that there's fairly good reason to see this. They haven't like changed my estimation of them in some massive way. I think that at their best they could be a semis team. But their worst, is still in the bracket, and
yes,
their median outcome still feels like quarters. They're definitely of the caliber to be at that point in the season.
Yeah, very solid team. Seamus Robinson, Anton Orme, they're good. I think that they have a lot of room to get better, and we've seen them lose to BYU before and then have a great season. It's just the BYU is just that good. So, interesting stuff. Now, UC Santa Cruz has to be the story of the tournament, Keith.
Slugs, baby.
Banana slugs in specific. They make it all the way to semis. And they get some really nice wins along the way, including a crazy game on the stream where they beat Oregon after a 10-minute universe point with 2 layout goal line Ds, followed by just brutal throwaways deep. And they finally got a short field turn, punched it in to beat Oregon and get through from quarters into semis, where they got thumped a little bit by Cal Poly. But they were a team kind of coming up last year, and I really think they look like the real deal. The thing is, it's interesting. They could struggle a little bit because the Southwest is just so deep. They're going to need to get bids. I do think they have the chance to be the second best team in the Southwest this year. But
what a sentence.
I know. But UCLA, Riley Kirkman Davis not playing, so that he's going to be a big addition for them. Calzone is very good. There's a lot of season to go here, but I really think that they look like they have what it takes to be a top tier college team.
They look the part. I feel like when you see these kind of teams that usually are regional level, have a banner year, it's because they have some elite club player or two on the team. They have something like that, some star, and this team doesn't really have that. They have a nice balance of players who can compete. They can go out there and play defense. It doesn't feel gimmicky with them. They have some good players. They have Liam J, who I think was probably their most impressive player on balance. But Ethan Kleiman came up with those big blocks you mentioned against Oregon. Aiden Curry has been the name I think most people know from them. They were getting contributions. Toby Warren is a nice addition. That kind of balance for them, I think makes them feel sustainable. They don't feel like a flash in the pan. I wonder if they will want for that star later in the year. Are they going to need somebody who can walk in there and win them a point? I don't know if they have that person, but Liam J could be that guy. I'm not quite sure. They got the wins though. They certainly backed it up and justified the nascent preseason hype that they started to get.
Yeah, I think we'll see if Liam J can turn into one of the best handlers in the Southwest. I think it's possible. But they didn't have a cheapy run either, Keith. Like they finished third. They beat UCLA soundly in the third place game, 15-10. And in pool play, they had to beat Utah State and Washington. Like that's not any cheap run. I mean, Washington was missing some guys, but I feel like these are quality wins. And even if they lose to Oregon and don't make it to semis, I think still would have been a successful weekend for them. So I like what I see. I think they're clearly like working hard this season. I mean, they looked in good shape. They were fast, explosive, and they have some discipline things to work on in terms of the offense. And I think that they're going to need to have some schemes tightened up a little bit defensively. It could be a little scrambly at times, which worked in their favor at times, but also left them giving up some easy points at times. So a team definitely keep an eye on.
And the implications for the broader bid picture are stark. I feel like the most likely scenario somehow is just Southwest gets 3 bids and 4 teams got to battle it out with some extra challengers from elsewhere. But that if they get 3 or 4, that's going to start to draw on a pretty thin pool, and you start to look at teams from New England and the Southeast and the Northwest, where they're hoping to be multi-bid regions to try and carry things, and that it could be concerning to see the Southwest looking so good to start the year.
Well, I mean, look at the Southwest had 4 teams in semis, Keith. No Northwest teams in semis. That obviously bodes very well. And you have multiple, like Oregon taking a couple of losses, universe point losses. That's a big rankings point swing. They lose to both Cal and Santa Cruz on universe this weekend. Now, I think that Oregon and Washington at full strength, I think, are going to be bid earning teams, but maybe one of them finishes right around that bubble spot and doesn't get a bid. And of course, then you have the question, what's going to happen with BYU? If they play, they're almost certainly going to earn a bid. Are they going to play at regionals or at conferences or not? Because that's the rule, right? If they play conferences, strength bid stays in the Northwest. If they don't play conferences, it drops to the next team in the rankings. And this has come up before. So that's already something to keep an eye on. But it feels like normally SBI is where Southwest bids go to die. And I think you're just seeing like the strength of the division of the region this year is up, and they're now in a position where they got to be thinking about, can we get 3 or even 4 bids?
The Southwest bid ignition. Could that be what SBI stands for this year? I don't know. I'm workshopping it. Don't forget about UBC. UBC lose double game point to SLO, and they were also missing some players. So that Northwest tier was like clearly just like one step below if you remove BYU from the equation. The Southwest, but like feels like you have 3 universe losses that like could have flipped things around. So you're a coin flip away really in a couple of situations from making this a very Northwest heavy affair. But this is what I'm talking about. I mean, you've got Northwest is clearly deep. I mean, you're talking about, we don't know what we're going to expect from Washington. We're going to talk more about them, but Utah State, UBC, Oregon, they all had solid weekends. Oregon State's out there. UVic had a solid weekend. Like, there's going to be a lot of teams hungry for bids in the Northwest. We already have banged the drum for New England. Where are the extra bids coming from? We were talking about the North Central when we did our regional preview in our region by region breakdown in the subs only section. You were talking about the North Central. Like how they have 3 teams that want bids. There's just not going to be enough to go around.
That's right. Are you concerned about these Northwest teams, Keith? Not even necessarily the bid picture, but like we're expecting good years from Washington and Oregon, and they didn't really bring it this weekend.
I am concerned. I'm concerned about Washington. I'm willing to give both these teams the benefit of the doubt. Long histories of success. Missing key players. I thought Oregon looked pretty good considering that they were missing some key players. I kind of expected them to play a little bit worse than they actually did. I thought Micah Glass, the freshman handler, looked like he was a big impact player for them right away. So in his first college tournament, guy's going out there and he's one of the best players in the field. And so I think that you're going to see them continue to get better. And I actually walked away from this feeling better about Oregon in the long run. Maybe not necessarily their bid shot, but I think that they could be the best team in the region outside of BYU. Washington, even minus Tony Vanieri, concerning performance for the Sun Dodgers. I mean, they went 3-5. They didn't beat they beat Case Western 13-10. That's their best win, which is like a mid-tier win. Like that's not even like something you're going to go out and be like, wow, that's super exciting. They lost those 5 games all by 3 or fewer goals. They lost to UBC by 4 in their last game of the weekend. But they were not out there getting...
They lost by 2, I think. 11-9.
Oh, you're right. They lost by 2. You're right. They lost 11-9. So they lost all of those games losses. by 3 or 2 or goals. Yep. Like they were in those contests. They were not getting dogged. And I think that's probably a good sign for them that, adding in a couple pieces and tightening things up a little bit could make a big difference. But
and keep in mind, Asaf Galan got hurt too early on day 1 and did not play again. And unlike usual, they don't have I think over the past few years, they've been really deep. They've had a number of players who have like elite club experience to fall back on. So like they can absorb those losses. I just don't know if they have the team to do that now. It's a little bit of a TBD for them. I mean, Vanieri is going to be one of the best players in college. Is he worth 2 goals a game to them? Honestly, he might be, Keith. And their weekend could look very different if they were plus 2 goals in each of these games.
Yes.
So I'm not sure. I think that I just feel like the jury is out on this one because we just did not see the actual team we expected to see. It's like the 49ers playing against the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. Okay. I don't want to talk about it anymore than that mention right there.
We've seen Washington play shorthanded before, and we saw other teams at this tournament playing shorthanded. Your UCLA's, your UBC's, Oregon, and
it's true.
They did not have the kind of results that Washington had. So
yeah, they weren't missing a Tony Vanieri. Although that's fair. UCLA playing at times without RKD, like he's that important, right? Value wise to the team. Yeah, well, we'll see. It's not a good weekend for them. You have to admit it. Not a good weekend for them. Okay, let's talk women's division. Carleton gets the win. But let's start with BYU here too, because Keith, BYU did not play Carleton.
Sadly,
if they played, who wins?
From the tape, BYU, I think. They only what do they only have one team in common that they both played Stanford, and BYU won by 1 more goal. I don't think that's particularly compelling evidence.
It was similarly close games. What I will say, BYU did not get broken at all the entire weekend, including by Stanford, probably the best defensive team at the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, BYU that was as close as it got, was that 3-goal game, which, is about what you expect, I guess, if a team doesn't get broken. And Carleton, that was their game against Stanford, was also their only close game. They absolutely crushed everybody else. So on balance, it seems pretty even, but BYU looked impressive. And that's with their tiny roster. They barely had 2 lines of people.
They had 13 players on the roster.
Yeah.
They didn't even have 2 lines.
Didn't even get there.
I think they carry 15 total.
That doesn't seem out of line for what we've seen from BYU, but keep your good players on the field, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, very impressive. I mean, this is what I expected, to be honest. We've seen them take a step forward every single season, and they were really good last year. But they are better now. I mean, unbroken. That's amazing. And it's not like they didn't have turnovers. They did. They're just so good defensively.
Yeah, I mean, when you have 13, you don't really have an O and a D line. So,
yeah.
I mean, obviously not getting broken is good no matter how you slice it. But He's pretty much the same players out there all the time.
But Carleton gets the win over Stanford. They were down in that game in the final, but came back late, started to get some more pressure, force some more turnovers. The interesting game because both defenses had a lot of success, and both O-lines need a lot of work, which is interesting coming from Carleton. That's a team that I generally expect to be sharp offensively, but they're not there yet. They look a little bit young. It's definitely a lot of raw talent. I don't quite know what to expect of this team moving forward.
I mean, you gotta also give them credit. It's not that surprising to me that they're a little raw offensively. I mean, it's January and they're coming from Minnesota. I can't imagine that they've had a ton of realistic outdoor reps. But yeah, I think that this is a pretty good sign for them. We were a little unsure of what to make of them in this, post Carly Campana, Caitlin Neer era for them. But we saw Mia Beeman-Weber step up in an even bigger role. They and Tori Gray were really big parts of this team. And there are certainly, obviously, a number of other good players, Alyssa Earhart, Emma Chin, Aria Kishner. Like this is a strong team. And the results bear that out. But I think this is probably even better than I would have expected them to perform. I don't necessarily. I wish that we had gotten more chances to see them against like really the top level teams. But
yeah, I mean they just destroyed
against
everybody
UC
else.
San Diego is that's a beatdown.
It shows you where UCSD is at too. I mean, it's just not the same team. They had some superstars last couple seasons, and they're in the full rebuild at this point. But yeah, I mean, they didn't really have a competitive game at all until Stanford. And Stanford's defense is extremely good. Extremely good. I think Stanford has a chance to make a real run this year. I don't know if they have enough talent to like top UNC or Colorado. I just don't think it's possible. It's just like they're just simply will not have enough talent to win those games. But coaching is amazing. Defense is already amazing. And offensive polish is only going to improve from here. So I think that you got to like Stanford's chances. They may well be the best team in the Southwest this year.
I think that's very possible. And, when we talked last week about the full college picture, I was talking about should Stanford is like maybe Stanford and Carleton were on the edge of like, are they tier 2 teams for me? And I think this weekend firmly shows that they could be at that level. The group of teams competing for semifinal spots goes that deep, and they maybe should be higher in tier 2 for their respective performances. I don't know. When's the last time we saw Stanford have an efficient offense? Ever like even when they've had really good players, even in their like title contention seasons of the modern and just purely modern era here. But going back to Steph Lim and Michaela Meister, like I don't know that we've ever seen this team be like a polished offensive machine. And I would love to see some of that dialed in. If their handlers can deliver the disc consistently, I think that would go a long way because obviously they're going to feel the top level defense. That's just the way that it is. You can count on it. They have plenty of good defenders. They have great systems. They're going to keep getting better. So I think Stanford's a real threat to win the Southwest.
Some nice players too. I mean, Esther Filipek was very impressive this weekend. So let's see. Further down, you look at the other semifinalists. UCSD does make semis, and UCSB loses to Stanford by 1 in a very tight, very defensive-oriented game. I mean, obviously, it's a good sign that UCSD is still able to get all the way to semis, but there's just the gap there is bigger than it's been. I think that it's hard to say right now at this point in the year, but I do think there's a chance that the Southwest only ends up getting 2 bids. Like, does UCSD do enough? Does, where else do you even look? I guess Davis, they had a pretty good weekend, but I just don't know. Like, some good outer region wins for UCSD. They beat Wisconsin, they beat Utah. And maybe that's enough, but I don't think this Southwest region is what it has been, and I don't know how many bids are going to end up getting.
Yeah, they opened the weekend with that really close game against Wisconsin. They win at 9-8, and I was like, okay, nice Wisconsin, but UCSD able to put it up. That win looked a lot less rosy by the end of the weekend. I mean, Wisconsin ended up losing to Northwestern, and they didn't win a game until their last 2 games of the weekend. They beat Cal Poly Slow. That algorithmically, that 9-8 win may actually hurt UCSD when it comes down to the end of the year. It's hard. The Southwest did not do themselves a lot of favors. They had some really mixed performances from Cal and UCLA and Davis. I think you should be worried a bit if you're a Southwest fan. If you're thinking, oh, we're in for another year where we could get 3-4 bids. Like, I'm not saying that's out the window, but some of these results are not going to help. Davis loses their last game of the weekend, 9-5 to Victoria.
Yeah, Victoria taking some bid points.
Yeah, solid team. Like, don't get me wrong, they're a good team, but the algorithm is not going to care. It's not going to be happy about it. Cal loses to Davis, barely beats Utah, gets crushed by Carleton, barely beats Northwestern. Like that's not a particularly sterling resume to take into the algorithm. You have Santa Cruz. They had some decent results, but they beat UCLA. UCLA lost to Santa Cruz. So those kinds of results, I think, are kind of feel like the Southwest shooting themselves in the foot early on.
Yeah, I mean, you look at UCLA, for instance, and they do get an out-of-region win over Utah, and they get an out-of-region win over Wisconsin. Kind of a disappointing weekend overall for Wisconsin. I think I was expecting a little bit more from them. And it's tough. They're coming from cold weather, and it's not like it was a total disaster or anything. They got a couple wins to close out the weekend. They beat Cal Poly Slow, and I think maybe a forfeit win over Lewis and Clark. It's showing up as 1-0 in Score Reporter, so maybe that will be corrected at some point. They hung in there against a lot of teams, but end up taking a lot of losses. I just think, they just have to figure out how to string it together a little bit more on offense. I think defensively, they've got a solid team, and they definitely look like they're better than they've been. I just don't know if these results are gonna do them any favors when it comes down to trying to get that second bid for the North Central, which obviously they're going to need.
Yeah, their results seem to get worse as the tournament went on, which made me think that the travel really started to get to them a little bit. I think they started out really strong, and I think that they look like they have the tools. They have some strong handlers. Tisbury, they were playing very well. Kami Stark downfield was a big weapon. So I think that there are some pieces here to be excited about. But on the other hand, I don't think that these results are necessarily going to do great things for them in their ability to try and get a second bid. They're going to have to root for the Southwest from here on out. They need that UC San Diego and Davis losses to still look good.
Yeah.
But they also are clearly like a full mile away from Carleton. And so second bid starts to look imperative right now. Maybe, there's a lot of season left. Sure, things could change. We've seen crazy things happen in North Central Regionals, but not in the women's division lately. If you thought like maybe this is a down year for Carleton, up year for Wisconsin, maybe things will be really tight. Like the early picture from January does not tell that story. So Wisconsin needs to step up their regular season play to try and get this bid.
Well, it was a nice weekend for Victoria. I think it bodes well for the Northwest. We know that UBC, Oregon, and Washington going to be very good teams this year. And Victoria comes away 4-3. They lose to the top 3 teams of the tournament: Stanford, BYU, Carleton.
Competitively, they lost to Stanford pretty close, and they were in it with BYU a little bit. They got throttled by Carleton.
But then they get crushing win over UCLA. They destroy Utah. They get a 4-goal win that you mentioned over UC Davis. I think it's a good sign. And the Northwest looks like maybe the strongest region this year.
This result was one I did not foresee. I think when I was doing research for my 10 unranked teams to watch, like Victoria came across my radar, but they weren't a team that I seriously considered. I did not see this coming. If you told me they were going to beat UCLA, almost bagel UCLA at this point in the year, never would have seen it coming. I think that UVic sounds like that they're legit. So they're just another contender in a crowded Northwest that, you know, we haven't seen Washington yet. We haven't seen Oregon yet. So we don't exactly know what those teams are going to be like, but UBC obviously looks very strong. And so the Northwest looks pretty solid. Utah also had some things to get excited about. Northwest going to be contending for some bids here.
Let's go across the country to North Carolina, where the kickoff took place, the men's division kickoff. No surprise here, Keith. UNC Darkside dominant en route to a win at their season opener. And, not a ton of surprises here. I think that the more interesting kind of in the mid-tier, but UNC beats NC State 15-8 in the final. Those were the top two seeds. NC State getting a 15-10 win over UNC Charlotte in semis. I think NC State's a good team, Keith, but UNC just a level above all of these teams easily.
Yeah, they covered your 6.5 goal line in the final. UNC, I think the line was 6.5.
Yep.
I thought maybe NC State could keep it closer, but that was not the case. And I think that jives with the rest of the scores from the weekend. 5-goal win over UNC Charlotte, close game with Georgetown. I think I want to say that game was 10-10. They were playing Georgetown in quarterfinals. I think that game was tied at 10s. And then NC State pulled it out with a nice late run and won 15-12. Shout out to Georgetown. I think they had a solid weekend. It looked like, again, we look like we have UNC, NC State, and then like a whole crowd of AC teams that I don't know what to make of your South Carolinas, your Georgetowns, your UNC Charlottes, your Dukes. Duke was playing without Seth Weaver this weekend. When they get him back from injury, how much better could they look? JMU was playing this weekend, Virginia Tech, it's crowded. AC regionals could be a madhouse depending on how many bids that they end up with.
I'm feeling a little buzzy about South Carolina, Keith.
Okay.
I don't know if they're going to end up in the top 25 this week, but I think they got a real case to be made. They did not lose to anybody except UNC and NC State. They lost by 4 to NC State, so definitely a level below them. But they beat Duke. They got 2 wins over UNC Charlotte, a good team. They crushed the D3 teams, Richmond and Chop. I like what I see here. I mean, I think, temper your expectations, but this is a team that could potentially get the last bid out of the AC. If there's 3.
That's bold.
Is it? I mean, I feel like looking at these results, why not?
Do you mean finish third at regionals or win a third bid during the regular season?
Well, that's to be decided. I wasn't there. I haven't seen the tape yet. I don't know how they looked, but
tape's coming.
Based on these results, I mean, a lot of hype about Duke. Maryland is in the top 25 right now, which I completely disagree with. I think it makes no sense. Maryland. Makes no sense.
William & Mary just won a tournament this weekend. I didn't mention them either. I mean, there are going to be
crazy.
10 good teams, but just not a lot of great teams.
Yeah, I mean, you have a great team in UNC, you have a very good team in NC State, and then you have a lot of strong teams. I mean, I don't think it's any guarantee that NC State gets out of this region. There's just too many ways. There's going to be pitfalls in every game down the stretch at AC regionals. So, pretty interesting. But yeah, I think South Carolina had a really nice start.
It's intriguing. I mean, I think these are an intriguing set of results for South Carolina. And we've seen them be competitive in the past. So we know that they are not a team that you can take lightly. Well, definitely a team to keep an eye on during the season. I'm not exactly sure what to make of them. The other team that I think probably had a solid weekend, and as you mentioned, is Penn State. One of the few. Are they the only out of region team?
Chirp.
Yeah, they definitely got in their chirp bag on Twitter at me. I guess they're really proud that they beat Duke without Seth Weaver or whatever. But they make it to quarters and lose to UNC Charlotte. I don't know. I guess that's great. Thumbs up. I look that
You're starting beef right now, Keith.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting into it. Well, maybe a little beef for the show is good. Maybe we need some beef. But
I mean, a little bit of preseason buzz seems justified by these results, right? 2 wins over Duke. They lose to UNC. Now, obviously, you can take a look at that UNC Charlotte loss in quarters and be like, it's not a very good loss. And maybe it's not, but I actually think UNC Charlotte's pretty good.
I think so too. And they beat the Georgetown team. I was just saying could be kind of good too. So like, I think Penn State's going to be really in the mix in the OV. Like I think that Ohio State is not safe.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is I'm my eyes firmly on Penn State now. Can they continue to show off these kinds of results later in the year? Curious. So overall, I think mostly to expectations. Other than that, at kickoff, Richmond wins the D3 battle over Chop. Couple wins against them. Richmond should be, I think, a very solid D3 team this year. Only the 2 wins there, but competitive with some of the other good teams at the tournament.
Yeah, probably not a return necessarily to glory, but not a bad weekend for Richmond.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be taking a look ahead to this weekend's Florida warm-up down in Tampa. It's a 3-day tournament and tons of action with match play instead of pool play. It's such a fun tournament, my favorite of the year. It's all coming up next. Welcome back to Deep Look. Coming up this weekend, Florida warm-up down in sunny Tampa. How many teams are going this year? This is always just a massive tournament. We've got 23 teams in the field. Many of the top 25 men's teams in the country will be there. BYU going back-to-back SBI straight into warm-up. They did this last year, Keith. Acquitted themselves quite nicely. I think we might as well talk about it right away. Can this team go undefeated at warm-up? We discuss it every year. They play 8 games in 2 days. And they will have some easy wins for sure, but they also have to play Pitt, Brown, Carleton. So what do you think, Keith? Can they pull it off on a week's rest?
I don't know if you've heard, Charlie, but I think because these BYU games don't count, teams do not try against them. I think that Pitt's going to run out the bottom 7 for the entire. The bottom 7 is not even taking a break. They might even just run out 6. Have one guy.
I literally still see people saying this kind of stuff. It's crazy.
No, teams respect BYU. They know that BYU is going to be one of their best chances to play against a good team. No one is laying down for BYU. Please, that narrative, for whatever few embers of it remain, they should be out by now.
Please kill it dead.
Yeah, I think undefeated is definitely a possibility. I think I would still put it at a plus number, not a big plus number, but having to go through 3 really good teams and some other solid teams, I don't know. I'm not sure that I'm going to expect them to take all those.
It's going to be interesting. So over under 7.5 wins.
Basically, will they lose a game?
Yeah.
I'm going to take the under.
I'm happy to take the over. I think they might do it. I
definitely think they might do it.
We'll see. I'm excited to see the matchups against Pitt and Brown in particular. So,
do you want to make this an official pick? Like, do you want this to go into the picks record?
Put it into the record.
All right.
Lots of interesting teams coming down this weekend. You look at some of the teams I've already named: Georgia, UMass, Michigan, Minnesota, Northeastern, Texas. I'm curious to see what's going on with Florida. Michael Albertine back. Vermont. This is a big weekend, I feel like, for Vermont to really show us what they've got. Wisconsin, are they for real? This is always great because then they get to schedule all these games against all these different teams from all across the country. And, it's not a traditional pool play format. So there's sort of loosely grouped teams that play against each other, but then they also play out of pool games. And then it comes down to your overall record and then also the USAU algorithm to determine which teams end up making the bracket. So it's always fun. You kind of like every game matters, every point matters. And there will be 8 teams going to quarters starting on, what do they, I assume they'll play, the quarters are the last round on Saturday. And then they'll have semis and finals on Sunday. We are going to be streaming games this year for the first time from warm-up, so pretty excited for that. By the time this show comes out, we might already have our streaming schedule up, but I'm happy to just go through it right now with you, Keith. Any particular favorites on the list?
Well, I mean, I think you got to start with the marquee, really. So getting to see BYU and Pitt and Georgia and Brown, I think those are like your 2 marquee matchups.
Here's the full list starting Friday, 9 a.m. And the warm-up schedule is up online. Temple versus Illinois, Texas versus Wisconsin, A&M versus FSU, Minnesota, Vermont, that should be a fun one. BYU, Pittsburgh, Auburn, Michigan closing out the day on Friday. Then heading into Saturday morning, Georgia Tech takes on Virginia Tech, Florida versus UMass, Georgia versus Brown, Northeastern versus Carleton, and then 2 quarterfinals, 1 of the semis, and the final. So tons of live coverage, and this is always just the most fun tournament of the year. It really is, Keith.
I have never been, but this is just, it has something of a legend, I feel like, among the staff. Like, people just seem to really enjoy going to this event, and so being able to watch it should impart some of that. But I think there's something of just like kind of the return to college ultimate that this tournament fills in that void really well. But definitely these matchups look pretty fun. If beyond those 2 marquee matchups, like, and I guess you can decide whether you think Minnesota Vermont is a marquee matchup. I definitely think there's an argument for it. I think I'm mostly curious about probably Northeastern Carleton, slight edge over Texas, Wisconsin. Is like, I don't know what to make of these 2 teams. I'm really not sure exactly where I feel like they could go this year. I feel like they have a lot of wiggle room based on how they look, and this will be a great test for them. We'll have some results prior to this to gauge these teams on, but definitely curious about how these 2 programs will look given their roster changes over the past year.
Declan Miller debut, Keith. I know you're hyped.
He's very good. He's very, very good.
I think we could see him be an immediate impact player, like starting minutes straight away.
I mean, I think at his best, if he has his best season, like, he could be in All-American contention.
He is that good. So we'll see. But, Cut's also turning a lot of players over, coming off missing nationals. It's always interesting with this team, but they do get maybe the number 1 prospect in Declan Miller. So that's a pretty big deal, and it could shore them up for years to come. I'm curious that, Texas, Wisconsin for me is, I feel similarly about that matchup. It's like Texas will be the favorite, but Wisconsin coming off the nationals, it's not like it was a great nationals for them, but they continue the streak. Do they build on that performance? A win over Texas would be a huge starting point. I mean, I think that's what I love about this tournament is that you get these matchups early on that can kind of set the tone for your season. And that feels like a tone setting game for both teams.
Yeah, there's some folks back for this Wisconsin team. Like, they have some contributors. Nico Rodabat's back. Stefan Calderu is back. Like, Patrick Lavallee. Like, they're good players on this team. We haven't exactly seen Wisconsin show out. They've kind of like gotten in over the years. But I also, just if memory serves, I feel like Texas does not do well at warm up. Maybe I'm totally off base, but like, in my memory, Texas, even when we think they're going to be good, even when they go on to be good, when they have a good year, I feel like warm up is not usually a great showing for them. So that might worry me a little bit, but they're an exciting team to watch at worst. At worst, they're exciting.
I think this team's got a chance to be really good this year. They do not have an easy schedule. They get Wisconsin, Vermont, Northeastern, Michigan, and USF. And sure, they're probably going to easily win that USF game, but the other games are going to be competitive. But you look at this roster, plenty of talent there. Zach Slayton, John Clyde. I think that this, they have a chance to make a real statement here with some of these games in match play.
Indeed. I don't know if they're missing a couple people. I feel like their roster looks a little small, but like Aaron Barcio, Matt Chambers. So maybe they're missing a couple bodies. Names that and are strong players, but that could obviously have an impact. Because I don't see them on the tournament roster as is. But yeah, John Clyde, Xavier Fuzat, Zach Slayton, good strong players. Gavin Babbitt. We saw some Twitter hype for Gavin Babbitt, Jake Worthington. I think this is going to be another gritty team, but I'm not sure exactly what to expect from them at this tournament.
The problem with warm up is they're always missing people or they have injuries. So they, at least at this moment, as we record on Tuesday, they are missing some of their most notable names. I mean, Matt Chambers obviously will be a big omission. He's not there. Where else do you look at, Keith? Like who can win this tournament? Maybe we should go talk about that because BYU can't win it. I think clearly Brown and Pitt can win it. How deep does that list go?
Definitely Brown and Pitt are at the top. And then I think I would include Vermont, Minnesota, Georgia. And do I want to go as far as UMass? I feel like warm-up is like a tournament where they play really well. I still don't know if I can get behind it. Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with Vermont, Minnesota, and Georgia.
The reason to be hyped about UMass is that last year they were really good and they were not playing with Orion Cable, who of course is no longer on the team, but he wasn't at warm-up last year. I was told that they will have flights late enough to be in the finals.
I'm glad they're out ahead of the PR nightmare. They've been getting made fun of for a year. Someone just today made fun of them for it in our Discord.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, I don't know quite what to expect from UMass. It's such a disappointing finish to last season. Some graduating, some players leaving, but they have some really impressive young talent, and so. Can they take that next step with the roster that they do have? Even if the top end ceiling is lower, maybe they can, without Orion Cable, feel like they can coalesce around the team that was so good at warm up last year.
Yeah, they continue to bring in strong recruits. I think this team will be deep. They've got good club experience. The club environment up there is good, so they're getting players who are getting good reps. Players like Noel Sierra, not a name who I think a lot of people know, but I think he could be an impact player for them this year.
Now we got to get hyped for Wyatt Kellman too.
Yeah, obviously you got to start with this team. You talk about Wyatt Kellman, Luca Harwood, Caleb McSweeney. Like those are the three names I think that are going to be the anchors of this team. But if they have the depth behind that, if we see this team deliver with the depth, then I start to think you start thinking of this team as a potential top 10 team. But I know everybody's going to be gun shy on them given the history, and I think that's just fine.
I like their schedule. I mean, that's always a big part of this tournament. They're playing A&M, Minnesota, UCF, Florida, Michigan. I mean, it's not a bunny schedule, but like they could go 5-0. Would it shock you if they beat Minnesota?
No, it would not.
I think they will definitely at least go 4-1. Well, 3-2. They could lose to Michigan. I do not see them losing to Florida, UCF, or A&M.
Are there any teams like off the radar? You think? I feel like there's always somebody who makes some noise. I know that this feels like the appropriate terminology here is make some noise. Is there a team that you feel like outside of the top 25 who could push in you?
Well, it's so much schedule based at this tournament. I always think it's very interesting to look at each team's schedule because if you get the right kinds of matchups, you could absolutely make a run. Where should we start there? I mean, I want to take a look at Florida. They're not in the top 25. Let's take a look at their schedule. Auburn, Brown, Carleton, UMass, Pitt. They're dead. They have no chance. I'm sorry. Good for them. I mean, that's a tough schedule. I know they like to get the tough matchups at this tournament. but that I do not see them being able to advance even to quarters. Probably.
Look, if they,
I don't know if there's enough wins on the ledger.
If they beat one of Carleton or UMass and then lose close games in their other, they could take one blowout probably only to Pitt or Brown. Then maybe I'm trying to carve the path for them.
Yeah, I mean, again, you probably have to go 3-2 to make the bracket, but I think occasionally a 2-3 team, 1 or 2 gets in. They have to beat Auburn. They have to beat one of Carleton and UMass, and preferably both. But, if they beat Auburn and Carleton and lose big to Brown and Pitt and play tight against UMass, it's possible, Keith, that they'll make quarters. What's another team that you want to take a look at?
Charlie, how about, are you ready for this? How about Temple?
You can't be serious.
Look. Temple, we've had a contentious relationship with Temple. But Nate Little's back.
Andrew
Sievert's back. Like, Nate Little's going to be one of the best players in this tournament.
Easily.
Is it Temple time? Have we gotten to Temple time?
Let's take a look at the schedule.
We got to look at the schedule. So they play Illinois and Eli Artemakis. They play Georgia Tech, Brown, Wisconsin, and South Florida.
Well, I see. They could definitely go. They could go 4-1. They could go 4-1. They're going to lose to Brown, but that's the only game that you really look at and you say they're definitely going to lose. If they want to be a real serious contender this year, I need to see them go at least 3-2 and probably go 4-1. They could lose to Wisconsin, and that would probably be fine. 3-2, get in the bracket, okay. But like maybe we were a year early on the hype train with Temple, Keith. I saw the pieces there last year. They're just the structure, the discipline wasn't there.
Yeah.
They still have the pieces. So can they add that stuff? Doesn't seem impossible. You're going to have that good continuity. But I mean, they were disappointing last year, frankly.
They were a bit. So let's see if maybe that seasoning, maybe that going through the tough stuff, the school hard knocks for Temple alert. Auburn's another team I've got my eye on. They were in my 10 unranked teams to watch list. They have a mixed schedule. They play Florida, BYU, Michigan, Texas A&M, and Minnesota. So, they're going to have to beat a Michigan or a Minnesota, I think, along the way. Maybe 3-2 will do it if they beat. Nah, they got to beat Michigan or Minnesota to go 3-2. Yeah, so that's what's required. But they were at nationals last year. Obviously, lost a lot of top talent. But we think that they could contend in the Southeast if we see them step up in a big way.
All right. Well, it's time to make our picks, Keith. We have to decide. There's no real obvious clear path here. How teams are going to match up, where they're going to match up. It's going to come down to the algorithm. But who are you taking to make the final?
Yeah, with the not having a clear path definitely makes it tough. I'm going to take Pitt. I feel like warm up is a tournament they do very well at. I think I gotta take Brown, and then Georgia. And
you're picking all your semis teams, huh?
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, do I want to go Brown Pitt in the final? I do just have to do finals. Do I do the chalk? It's definitely the chalk. Be curious how many people start looking at Vermont. Vermont's got to be tempting. You know what? Let's get on the Vermont hype train early. I'm going Pitt Vermont in the final.
Wow.
Let's do it.
Okay. I'm going Pitt and Brown. I understand that who knows, they could end up facing off early in semis. But I just think that they're still. I mean, Pitt is clearly in an up year. They're going to be very good. And, Brown loses JR and a couple pieces, but they also bring back Jacques Nissen and Leo Gordon. I mean, this is a team that had the best offense in the country last year, and most of the pieces are back. So I don't see why they can't just roll through. Actually, I haven't looked at their schedule. They get BYU, of course.
It's not bad.
Florida, Temple, Wisco, BYU, Georgia. I mean, we'll see if there's much of a drop off. I don't expect it. I don't expect it. And remember, they played without Randolph for a bunch of the tournament last year. So
that's true.
I'm
they
taking
have a lot of system and low key. No one, I don't know. Nobody's talking about Elliot Rosenberg, but if he's a junior, he's going to be breakout eligible. I think you're about to get a nice Elliot Rosenberg season. For
I am going to take Pitt to win the final.
Me too.
Get revenge. They're getting revenge. I think it's just they're poised for a great season. You're doing it too?
Yeah. Give me Pitt. I think this will be a tournament where they confirm any preseason hype that this is a team that could contend, that they're going to be in the mix. I can't pick. I'm not picking Vermont over Pitt in the final. If taking Vermont to get an over Brown is my hot take. I don't have the temperature room to go hotter. Burn me up.
Does Brown have someone to guard Henry Ying?
I'm
not really sure they did last year. They definitely don't this year. Yeah, right. Cam Kearney's gone.
Yeah, he's not there.
Villeneuve gone.
Yeah, I don't. Jock Nissen, D-line shutdown guy.
I don't know if I see it. But we'll see. Should be fun. So Keith and I both taking Pitt, and the subscribers making their picks as well in the Ulti World Discord. Full and plus subscribers able to vote every single week on the tournaments at hand. And some interesting votes this week, Keith. You want to break down the picks from the listeners into the finals?
Interesting if you're not me, because they aligned with me. The subscribers are also picking Pitt versus Vermont in the final. I'm disappointed. I really thought I was swerving with Vermont. Brown really not that popular. Only slightly more popular than Georgia. So now it's like I wish I could go back. Maybe I think about picking Brown. But yeah, so I'm aligned with the subscribers on who makes the final and who wins. We both have Pittsburgh taking the victory, and the bonus, Charlie. The bonus, will BYU go undefeated? The subscribers are going with no. They're with me. They're 2-1 voting for no. So you're alone. You're on BYU Island.
Yeah, I mean, I was put on the island by you. You stranded me on the island. I mean, I do think they have a chance to do it, but I think the consensus bet is correct that they won't do it. I think it's just tough. I mean, they have to play the three best teams in the tournament, so that's challenging. You know, even if they're the best team, let's say they're the best team of all four, right? It's still hard to win all three of them. And we've seen that in the past. You know, they've come very close and lost by one a couple times in one of their games. So,
I mean, they do have to play the three best teams in the tournament, but that may very well be true of whichever team wins too. I mean, you're probably going to play one of the best three teams in the final, and you're going to probably play BYU.
The only thing I'm going to say here, look, I get why people are excited about Vermont. I too am excited about Vermont, but thinking that Brown is about to like fall off a cliff or something is not backed up by this team and the roster that they are bringing back this year. They are still going to be extremely good. And I think, you know, I guess the question for me is going to be, how does the loss of Villeneuve hurt them? We know JR is going to be painful. That is what it is. But I really think that we're going to continue to see their offense be extremely difficult to get breaks against. And I will be surprised if they don't make the final. I think they are more likely to win than to miss the final.
I am still think Brown is really good, but I also think Vermont's like basically going to run it back. So for them, it's going to be really easy to hit the ground running. And I think it might take some time for Brown to make all the adjustments necessary to be the team.
I'm just telling you,
they can
great teams are great teams, and they stay great teams a lot of the time, as long as they have the player personnel to back it up, which I think that they do. Like Jacques Nissen might be the best handler in college this year. Was he last year?
Certainly had the production. So
we'll see.
Maybe we'll talk more about them in our sub bonus.
All right, Keith, what happened last week? I think you took the early lead.
Narrow advantage for me. I'm up just a single point, which it's hard to get a ton of differentiation this early on. But while none of us got the finalists right in the men's division for SBI, I did get Stanford in the women's division. I was alone one of us to pick that. So that's going to give me the 1 point advantage. Charlie and the subscribers are tied with 8 points. I have 9 points through our first weekend.
All right. Well, we're off and rolling and looking forward to this weekend. So
the bonus is going to be worth 1 point. Well, just like a semifinalist pick. So the BYU bonus will just be 1 point.
Well, I'm going back to back right alongside BYU. I'm heading down to Tampa for warm up this weekend.
Well, you go undefeated.
I hope to.
Haven't taken a loss yet.
Perfect streams. That's the plan, Keith. So come say hi if you're at the tournament, and looking forward to a great weekend of action and hoping for just beautiful weather. I haven't checked the forecast. Let's take a look at the forecast. It's supposed to be a little rainy, perhaps, unfortunately. Scattered thunderstorms on Friday and Sunday, but it should be warm. It's going to be highs in the mid-70s. So hopefully the storms dodge us and we enjoy the warm sunshine. So thanks so much for tuning in. That's going to do it for this edition of Deep Look. Join us for our sub bonus segment Out the Back, where we dive into a conversation about the updated power rankings, college top 25, and where things stand after the early part of the season. Talk to you next week.